Greetings again, Mr. Ernst. It's a great pleasure to see you in our virtual studio because our real one has been shelled this night by a Russian missile. And yeah, right now it's undergoing some fixing because of the damage. And today I would like to ask you a couple of questions about the recent diplomatic events that are happening. For example, the upcoming Munich conference where Mr. J.D. Vance and Mr. Kellogg will meet President Zelensky for the first time, and the Secretary of Defense has already met Rustem Umerov, the Minister of Defense of Ukraine. Could you tell me where is this all going, this diplomatic process between Ukraine and new administration?
Well, there's been a fair amount of contact between President Zelensky and President Trump preceding the election and then preceding the inauguration, right? They met in New York in September, then they met in Paris after the election, but before the inauguration. And we know that Mr. Yermak was in Washington and he saw, I think, the Vice President-elect Vance and at that point, the prospective nominee, not the nominee, the prospective candidate to be the head of the National Security Council, Waltz. So there's been a fair amount of contact. And now, of course, the new administration is in place. And so Zelensky will have an opportunity to see Vance and Kellogg together in Munich. So there's been a fair amount of contact, and this makes perfect sense.
And about the recent claims of Mr. Trump about the possible $500 billion deal, do you see this as a realistic scenario for future negotiations with Ukraine, or it's more like an allegation or an advertising move from the new administration?
I think this is a very positive development. I mean, I can't speak precisely about whether it would be worth $500 billion any deal, but clearly, Trump spoke about the possibility of sending American weapons to Ukraine for Ukrainian rare earth and critical minerals. And obviously, $500 billion would be, what, 6, 7, or 8 years worth of weapons at the rate we've been sending them before. So that would be excellent for Ukraine's defense, for Ukraine's ability to not lose this war and hopefully win this war. And the fact that I think the new Secretary of the Treasury, Bessent, is going to Ukraine to explore this, again, is a sign that this is very serious.
Okay, and a follow-up question, the NATO question. We are hearing from Mr. Trump himself and some of his representatives that Ukrainian NATO is out of the question right now. We have heard negative statements from the previous administration, which were emphasizing that Ukraine will be a part of NATO someday. Right now, we hear that NATO is out of the agenda, out of the question. Is it worse for Ukraine to pursue this NATO goal right now, or do you think it's more important to go on one-on-one communication between Ukraine and the new administration right now?
That's a decision ultimately that Ukraine and the Ukrainian government need to make. I think it's pretty clear that Trump is not willing to consider for at least 20 years Ukraine joining NATO, right? That's what was coming out of his team even before the election. And I think it's possible to provide Ukraine with the necessary security even without being a member of NATO. Although I believe the smart policy for the United States, for the alliance, would be to bring Ukraine in very soon. But that's not where the President of the United States is.
Okay, so maybe you have some more remarks on what should we expect in the year 2025. President Zelensky has just gave an interview the day where he emphasized that Lithuania and Poland are in direct threat from the Russian army right now. In case of, God forbid, Ukraine loses the war in 2025, then NATO allies are in this direct threat of hybrid and conventional warfare from Russia.
Zelensky is absolutely right. Putin's aggressive ambitions go beyond Ukraine. And the leaders of most East European nations know that, with the exception of Orban and Fico. Certainly there are Americans who understand that. I'm not sure that, and I think it's safe to say that the principal security advisors to the president understand that. You know, Kellogg, Waltz, Rubio. But again, I would bring Ukraine into NATO if I had the ability, if I had a policy job.
I see, and maybe as a European ambassador of the United States, you have been a lot to the Eastern European countries, and if I am correct, to Uzbekistan as well as Ukraine. Do you see a possibility of European countries, these countries, like building an axis against this possible aggression of Russia, just to outlive their dictatorial regime, to outlive Putin? So can these countries, the Eastern Bloc of NATO, and Ukraine as part of that, some kind of quasi-alliance, yes, bilateral agreements, can we hold back this Russian imperial ambition long enough?
I think that the Trump initiative for peace in Ukraine includes a demilitarized zone between Russian and Ukrainian forces where European troops would be deployed. There is serious conversation about this in Europe. If the Europeans are willing to do that, they will undoubtedly seek some forms of American support. We would be smart to provide that support. And that could be, plus, lots of weapons to Ukraine, sufficient deterrent against future Kremlin aggression. But there would have to be very clear understandings about this.
Yeah, I can hear the telephone ringing.
Don't worry about
it. Is everything okay?
Let's just finish this.
Just let me get back on track with the question. Yes, the question, the militarized zone between Ukraine and Russia with European forces. We have already seen that the demilitarized zone in Rhine in Germany before World War II. And aren't you concerned about if Putin is not stopped right now militarily, if he gets his Munich #2, let's call it like that he will return more prepared with all of his allies, and it will be far worse than this local /global conflict in Ukraine right now?
Look, I believe, again, that Putin has aggressive designs. They go beyond Ukraine. If he wins in Ukraine, it will be because of weak leadership in the West, including in Washington. And he will therefore feel he can go beyond Ukraine to even challenge directly NATO, right? I could see him arguing, well, look, they didn't, Ukraine was a big country fighting well for its life. We can easily sweep into Lithuania before NATO has a chance to react, or we can easily sweep into Estonia before NATO has a chance to react. So I think that's a very real possibility.
Unfortunately, and let us hope that that will never happen, and we will stop this aggressive neo-imperialist expansion right now and right here in Ukraine.
Exactly.
Maybe you have some more remarks to say to us, and we can end the interview with that.
No, I think that's about it.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Herbst, for this interview. I hope that very soon we can return to our studio and we can see you again there. But right now we have to work in this home format. Luckily, nobody of the staff has been injured or has vanished. And it was only the equipment and the premises that took damage. Thank you again, Mr. Herbst, very much. Well, that seems to be all for today. Hit that like and subscribe button, share this video, because it is more than ever important for us to support the channel, your support for the channel, to help us continue to deliver the news of the free world directly to you from Ukraine. And for some time we will be hosting the wrap-up series from the home studios until our channel studio is being restored. So stay strong and don't let propaganda win.